India's most infamous serial killer, the chilling reign of Raman Raghav. In the bustling city of Mumbai, once called Bombay, the 1960s were a time of growth and change. But hidden in the shadows of its busy streets was a chilling story that would haunt the city forever. This is the story of Raman Raghav, a man whose name became synonymous with terror, leaving a trail of fear and destruction wherever he went. If you enjoy chilling and shocking stories like this, make sure to hit subscribe and follow for more deep dives into gripping tales from history. Your support helps us uncover more of these unsettling yet fascinating stories, so don't forget to leave a comment and share your thoughts. Now let's step into the eerie world of a case that changed Mumbai's history forever. Today, we're delving into a dark and chilling chapter from the annals of history, a horrifying case that is as unsettling as it is gruesome. Throughout history, the world has witnessed the terrifying acts of numerous serial killers, individuals whose heinous crimes have left indelible scars on society. These perpetrators of horror have brutally claimed the lives of countless innocents, driven by motives that defy comprehension. Today's story focuses on one such notorious killer, a deranged individual who crossed every imaginable boundary. This was not just a killer of men and women, but someone who showed no mercy, even toward nursing infants. This macabre tale hails from India, a country steeped in history and culture, and centers around a serial killer who unleashed unimaginable terror across Bombay, now Mumbai, in the 1960s. Known as the city that never sleeps, Mumbai is a bustling metropolis, forever alive with energy and movement. But in those grim days, the fear of this killer was so pervasive that as soon as darkness fell, an eerie silence blanketed the city, a silence born of dread. Though today's story is lengthy, I promise you it's worth every moment. By the time you reach the end, you'll be gripped by the sheer magnitude of this chilling narrative. The story begins in July 1968, when the Bombay police received a report of a gruesome murder in the Pointsur area near Borivali. Upon arriving at the scene, they discovered the lifeless body of a man sprawled outside a makeshift shanty. The victim had been savagely attacked with what appeared to be a sharp, heavy metal weapon. Inside the shanty, they found a woman and a child, both unharmed but deeply shaken. The woman, blinded by the darkness, could offer little information about the assailant. The police registered a case but conducted a lackluster investigation, dismissing it as an isolated act of personal vengeance. However, their assumptions were soon shattered. On the very same night, another murder a few kilometers away in Malad. Here, another man sleeping outside his home was found viciously bludgeoned. At this point, the police failed to connect the dots, treating the murders as separate incidents. But just 7 days later, horror struck again. On the Western Express Highway in Malad, a horrifying discovery was made. A family of 3 had been brutally murdered. The victims were a husband, his wife, and their 2-month-old infant. This time, the scene of the crime was even more horrifying. When the police arrived, they were met with an appalling sight. The killer had used a sharp, heavy object to inflict fatal head injuries on all 3 victims. Yet, amidst the horror, there was a silver lining for the investigators. This time, the killer had left behind critical pieces of evidence. Near the bloodied crime scene, police recovered a weapon, a thick iron rod twisted and sharpened at one end. Beside it lay a jacket hastily abandoned. These items marked the first tangible clues in a case that was spiraling into chaos. Who was this merciless predator, and what drove them to such savagery? The answers lay buried in a series of events that would unfold over the following weeks, a journey into the dark recesses of a mind capable of unthinkable. As we unravel this grim tale, stay with us, because the twists and turns will leave you shocked and horrified in equal measure. As the investigation deepened, the Mumbai police began piecing together earlier crimes. They recalled 2 murders from the previous week, where the victims had been killed in a strikingly similar manner, brutal attacks targeting the head. For the first time, the authorities began to suspect a connection between these heinous acts. This chilling realization marked the emergence of a pattern, the work of a serial killer. The police sent the recovered weapon and jacket for forensic analysis, hoping to uncover fingerprints or other clues. Unfortunately, the relentless monsoon rains in Mumbai posed a significant obstacle. Both the weapon and the jacket had been left outside, and the torrential downpours had washed away any usable evidence. This setback only added to the mounting frustration of the investigators, who now faced immense public pressure. The horrifying murder of an entire family had sent shockwaves across the city, igniting widespread fear and panic. Desperate to catch the culprit, the Mumbai police intensified their efforts, but progress remained painfully slow. Just days after this tragedy, another gruesome killing occurred. This time, the victim was a school teacher in Hanuman Nagar, Kandivali, who was attacked late at night in the same brutal manner. In the weeks that followed, the body count grew. Victim after victim was discovered, yet the killer left no trace behind. The police were left grappling with a nightmare, but amidst the chaos, three chilling similarities began to emerge. The timing. All murders occurred during the dead of night between 1 a.m. and 4 a.m. The modus operandi. Each victim suffered a fatal blow to the head inflicted with a sharp, heavy weapon. The target group. The victims were all impoverished individuals living in slum areas, indicating the killer's calculated choice to prey on society's most vulnerable. These patterns painted a terrifying picture of a calculated and remorseless predator who thrived on the city's vulnerabilities. As the string of murders continued, fear gripped Mumbai like never before. The bustling city, famed for its vibrant nightlife and unyielding pace, suddenly came to a standstill after sundown. Shops, parks, restaurants, and markets shut their doors early, leaving the streets eerily silent. Families barricaded themselves inside their homes, securing windows and doors, terrified of the darkness outside. Many people abandoned their usual habit of sleeping on verandas or in open spaces, choosing instead the relative safety of cramped indoor quarters. This pervasive fear also gave rise to self-proclaimed neighborhood vigilantes. Determined to protect their families, groups of men armed themselves with sticks, rods, and other makeshift weapons, patrolling the streets through the night. However, this wave of self-defense soon spiraled out of control. In their heightened state of suspicion, these groups often targeted innocent individuals, beggars, or solitary wanderers unlucky enough to be in the wrong place at the wrong time, were mercilessly beaten on the slightest suspicion. In some cases, these attacks escalated dangerously, and the police had to intervene to restore order. What started as a protective measure soon became another issue for the already overwhelmed police force. The line between fear and paranoia blurred, plunging the city into chaos. The question remained, who was this elusive killer terrorizing Mumbai, and how long would they remain unstoppable? Despite all the efforts, the murders continued unabated, each more baffling than the last. The killer seemed to appear and vanish like a phantom, leaving no trace behind. Witnesses were non-existent, no one saw him arrive, and no one saw him leave. This mysterious nature of the crimes gave rise to bizarre rumors among the terrified residents. Some began to believe that the murderer wasn't human at all, but a supernatural entity, perhaps a shapeshifter capable of transforming into a parrot or a cat to evade detection. These tales gained traction, fueled by fear and the inability of the police to make any progress in the case. With no solid answers and growing public hysteria, these myths became an outlet for the city's collective anxiety. The police force's failure only exacerbated the situation. Commissioner E.S. Modak, who led the Mumbai police at the time, was under tremendous pressure to crack the case and restore order. When the local police proved unable to stop the killings, Commissioner Modak decided to escalate the matter and handed the investigation over to the Criminal Investigation Department, CID. In August 1968, a special CID team was assembled under the leadership of Deputy Commissioner of Police, DCP, Ramakant Kulkarni, who was the youngest officer in the crime branch at that time. His appointment, however, was not without controversy. Many within the department criticized the decision, arguing that such a sensitive and high-profile case should not be entrusted to someone so new to the CID, especially one with limited experience. Despite these objections, the case was assigned to Kulkarni, and he wasted no time in assembling a formidable team. Nearly 2,000 police officers were deployed to patrol the affected areas around the clock. The goal was clear: apprehend the killer and put an end to the wave of terror. Yet, even with this massive mobilization, progress remained elusive. It was during this time that one of the team members, Inspector Vinayak Rao Wakatkar, brought a crucial piece of information to DCP Kulkarni's attention. Wakatkar recalled a series of eerily similar murders that had occurred just 2 years earlier, between 1965 and 1966. These previous killings had taken place in shanty settlements along the municipal pipeline near the Eastern Express Highway on the outskirts of Mumbai. Much like the current spree, the victims were impoverished individuals who were attacked while they slept. 19 people had been assaulted during that time, 9 of whom succumbed to their injuries. The weapon used in those murders was also a sharp, heavy object, and the attacks bore a striking resemblance to the current killings. Inspector Wakatkar. One fateful night, while patrolling with his team, Wakatkar noticed something unusual. A man wandering the deserted streets without fear, seemingly unaffected by the city's curfew-like atmosphere. At a time when even the bravest residents avoided stepping outside after dark, this man's boldness stood out like a glaring anomaly. This suspicious encounter, though from the past, suddenly seemed to hold the key to unraveling the mystery of the current murders. Was there a link between the two sprees? Could this wandering figure be the same person now wreaking havoc across the city? These questions would soon lead the investigation down a dark and unexpected path. Inspector Wakatkar's instincts told him something was amiss. Approaching the suspicious man, he questioned him about his identity. The man calmly replied that his name was Raman Raghav. Upon searching him, the police discovered a peculiar diary in his pocket. Inside, only two cryptic words were scrawled: Kalis, death, and Cotton, the end. Digging deeper into Raghav's background back at the station, Inspector Wakatkar uncovered a list of aliases the man had used over the years, including Sindhi Dalwai, Talwa, Anatambi, and Veluswamy. A deeper investigation revealed Raghav's troubling past. Born in 1929 in the Agreshwar Nellore village of Tirunelveli district, Tamil Nadu, Raghav had exhibited a proclivity for theft from an early age. By the time he turned 20, Raghav had left his village and moved to Mumbai. Though he briefly worked odd jobs to survive, his old habits soon resurfaced and he began committing petty thefts. One of these thefts eventually landed him in Baikula jail. Far from being reformed after his release, Raghav escalated his criminal activities, engaging in numerous robberies and dacoities. After serving a 5-year sentence for his crimes, Raghav found himself back under police scrutiny in 1965. Inspector Wakatkar, aware of his history, began interrogating him regarding a series of recent murders. Despite enduring intense questioning and even physical torture, Raghav remained eerily silent, offering no confession or reaction to the punishments inflicted upon him. Frustrated by Raghav's impenetrable demeanor but lacking concrete evidence, Inspector Wakatkar issued him a stern warning: leave Mumbai for 2 years or face immediate imprisonment if he returned. Raghav complied and vanished, and remarkably, the wave of violent attacks stopped as well. However, in 1968, 2 years after his departure, the killings resumed with a chilling familiarity. Now armed with the knowledge of Raghav's past and the striking parallels between the two crime sprees, Inspector Wakatkar became convinced that Raghav had returned to Mumbai and was behind the renewed wave of murders. He immediately ordered Raghav's police records to be retrieved. The records revealed vital information, including Raghav's fingerprints, photographs, and previous alias. Armed with this evidence, the police distributed his photo to every station across Mumbai and issued a citywide alert instructing officers to apprehend him on site. So the urgency of the search intensified after 2 murders on the nights of August 25th and 26th, 1968. In Chincholi Malad, 2 victims, Lalchand Yadav and Dular Yadav, were brutally attacked and killed in the same manner as the earlier victims. This time, however, the crime scene offered a breakthrough. Investigators from the crime branch managed to recover fingerprints from the scene. The prints were meticulously analyzed and compared with the records in Raman Raghav's file. The match was undeniable. The killer, who had eluded justice for so long, was finally identified. Raman Raghav was confirmed as the perpetrator behind the gruesome series of murders. The net was now closing around Raghav. With his identity confirmed, the entire police force mobilized, determined to bring the elusive serial killer to justice before more lives were lost. Raman Raghav remained at large, and the Mumbai police were relentless in their efforts to track him down. Every officer was equipped with his photo, questioning anyone who might recognize him, but progress was frustratingly slow. Despite their efforts, Raghav continued to evade capture, vanishing into the shadows of the sprawling city. During their search, the police expanded their investigation to the outskirts of Pointsur. Here, they encountered a woman named Manjula Bai Dalvi, who immediately recognized the photograph of Raghav. She referred to him as Anna and mentioned having seen him early one morning as he went to fetch water from the local well. Her account set the police on high alert. When asked if she knew where Raghav lived, Manjula admitted she wasn't sure but confirmed that she had spotted him in the area only a few days prior. Pressed for details about his appearance, she described Raghav as wearing a blue shirt, khaki half pants, brown canvas shoes, and carrying an umbrella. This information was critical. The police quickly relayed the description via wireless to all stations, urging officers to apprehend anyone matching it. Meanwhile, Teams combed the area near the well where Raghav was last seen, searching tirelessly through the day and night. Yet, once again, Raghav proved elusive. The breakthrough came the following day on August 27, 1968, when Inspector Alex Philo, patrolling near Bendi Bazaar, spotted a man whose appearance matched the description. The man was wearing a blue shirt, khaki half pants, and brown shoes, just as Manjula had described. In his hand was a wet umbrella, an odd detail as there had been no rain in Bendi Bazaar that day. Inspector Philo's suspicion deepened as he observed the man's demeanor. He decided to approach him for confirmation. As Philo got closer, he noticed faint blood stains on the man's clothes. This was the final clue he needed to act. Stopping the man, Philo questioned him and conducted a search. The items found on him were peculiar: 2 glasses, 2 combs, 2 pairs of scissors, an incense stand, soap, garlic, tea leaves, and 2 scraps of paper with numbers scribbled on them. These items seemed oddly meticulous for someone who had been living a transient, shadowy existence. When asked for his name, the man calmly replied, which immediately rang a bell with Philo. He recalled that Raghav was known to use multiple aliases, including Cindy Dalwai. Convinced of his identity, frustration mounted within the team. They knew that resorting to physical violence, even if effective, was both unethical and likely futile. Raghav had proven himself unyielding in the face of pain. Exhausted and at their wits' end, one officer finally asked him almost casually, "Is there anything you need?" To their surprise, Raghav spoke for the first time since his arrest. "I want chicken," he said, his voice calm and matter-of-fact. The officers, eager to elicit any response from him, promptly ordered chicken from a nearby restaurant. When it arrived, Raghav ate in silence, finishing the meal with deliberate precision. After he was done, the officers asked him again, "Do you need anything else?" Without hesitation, Raghav replied, "I want another plate of chicken." The request was granted, and he devoured the second plate with the same eerie composure. Once more, the officers asked if he needed anything else. This time, Raghav made a peculiar list of demands: coconut oil, a comb, a mirror, and, astonishingly, a prostitute. While the last request was immediately denied for legal and ethical reasons, the police decided to fulfill the rest. Coconut oil, a comb, and a mirror were procured, and Raghav set about indulging himself in a peculiar grooming ritual. He applied the oil generously to his hair and massaged it into his scalp, later rubbing it over his arms and legs with care, commenting on the pleasant fragrance of the oil. Using the comb, he styled his hair meticulously and then spent an extended period the tea vendor would pay with his life. That evening, he lingered near the tea shop, watching and waiting as the vendor closed up. He began following the man, biding his time to strike. However, before he could act on his murderous impulse, the police intervened. Caught red-handed in a theft case unrelated to the tea vendor, Raghav was arrested and sentenced to 1.5 years in Vadgaon jail. By the time he was released in early 1968, the thirst for violence that had consumed him had only grown stronger. Free once more, Raghav boarded a train to Karjat in Maharashtra, where he spent a few weeks wandering aimlessly. Eventually, he made his way back to Mumbai in July 1968, returning to Borivali, a place he knew well from his previous exploits. For several days, Raghav engaged in petty thefts, stealing small amounts of money and valuables. But soon, his focus shifted. One day, while passing a hardware store near Dahisar Bridge, he noticed a discarded motorcycle handle lying on the ground. Inspired, Raghav picked it up and took it to a blacksmith in Jogeshwari. He instructed the blacksmith to straighten the metal, add a slight curve to one end, and sharpen it to a fine edge. With his newly crafted weapon in hand, Raghav felt emboldened. A night or two later, he wandered into Poinsur, a quiet area on the outskirts of the city. There, under the cover of darkness, he came upon a small hut. Inside, a woman and her child were fast asleep, while a man slept outside on the ground. As the city slept, Raghav crept closer to his target. With a swift and brutal swing of his weapon, he struck the man on the head. The blow was powerful but not fatal, and the man screamed in agony. Unmoved by the cries, Raghav struck again and again until the man lay lifeless. The commotion woke the woman inside the hut. Seeing her husband's bloodied body outside, she screamed in terror, shattering the silence of the night. Fearing discovery, Raghav fled the scene, disappearing into the shadows. He wandered until he reached Malad, where he came upon another unsuspecting victim around 3 a.m. A man was sleeping on a cot outside his hut, oblivious to the danger lurking nearby. Without hesitation, Raghav approached and struck the sleeping man's head repeatedly with his weapon. The man didn't stand a chance. After ensuring the man was dead, Raghav began rummaging through his belongings. He took a wristwatch from the corpse and strapped it onto his own wrist. From the hut, he stole a torch, a blanket, a handful of peanuts, and a bag containing cash, a sum of 2,000 rupees. As Raghav recounted these horrific events, his tone remained disturbingly neutral, as if he were narrating the weather. For the police listening to his confession, it was a chilling insight into the mind of a man who had turned murder into a calculated, almost mundane routine. And this was just the beginning of his horrifying revelations. Raman Raghav continued his horrifying confession with yet another account of his cold-blooded crimes. A few days after his previous murders, he found himself wandering along the Western Express Highway in Malad late at night. In a remote and dimly lit area, he came across a small hut. Climbing up from the back to get a better look, he peered inside through a gap in the wall. Inside, he saw a woman nursing her infant under the flickering light of an oil lamp. What caught his eye, however, wasn't the scene of maternal care. It was the glint of a gold Mangal Sutra, a traditional wedding necklace, around her neck. Greed clouded his mind, and he immediately decided that he had to have it, regardless of the cost. He waited in the shadows, hoping the woman would eventually fall asleep. But as the hours ticked by, she remained awake, tending to her child until the early hours of the morning. Frustrated but undeterred, Raghav returned to the hut the next night and then again for the next 3 nights. Each time he found the woman awake, either rocking her baby to sleep or simply lying alert. On the 5th night, determined to carry out his plan despite the heavy rains, he armed himself with an umbrella and his makeshift weapon before heading back to the secluded hut. This time he found the family asleep. The woman lay on a cot with her child, while her husband rested on another cot nearby. With the rain masking his approach, Raghav crept closer and cut through the rope sealing the hut's entry. He slipped inside and in a calculated move delivered a fatal blow to the sleeping man's head with his sharp weapon. Before the woman could react, he turned his attention to her, brutally attacking her until she succumbed to her injuries. In the chaos, the couple's 2-month-old baby woke up, crying loudly. Showing no shred of mercy, Raghav silenced the child in the same horrifying manner. After ensuring the entire family was dead, Raghav stepped outside to confirm that no one had heard or seen him. Satisfied that he was alone, he left his weapon and umbrella near the shanty and went back inside. He removed the Mangal Sutra from the woman's neck, pocketing it greedily. However, as he attempted to undress her, he was startled by the sudden appearance of an old woman who had heard the commotion and came to investigate. The woman began screaming, and in his panic, Raghav fled into the darkness, leaving behind the scene of carnage. The next day, he cautiously returned to retrieve his weapon and umbrella, but found nothing. The police had already collected the items, sending them to the forensic lab for analysis. His greed was further punished when he later discovered that the Mangal Sutra he had stolen wasn't gold at all. It was a cheap imitation. Undeterred by this setback, Raghav continued his murderous spree. He soon made his way to Chincholi, Malad, where he visited an old acquaintance named Michael. Pretending to need materials for building a hut and digging the ground, he asked Michael for a sturdy iron rod. Michael handed him a 4-foot-long rod, instructing him to return it when he was done. Raghav, of course, had no intention of bringing it back. A few days later, Raghav arrived in Hanuman Nagar, Kandivali, where he spotted a solitary man sleeping inside a hut. Although he left without incident that night, his mind was already formulating a plan. The next day, he returned under the cover of darkness, equipped with the iron rod. This time, Raghav dug a small tunnel beneath the hut's wall, creating a secret entry point. Crawling inside, he approached the sleeping man and struck him repeatedly on the head with the rod, delivering 4 or 5 brutal blows that ended his life. After ensuring the man was dead, Raghav searched the hut for valuables. He found a wristwatch, a handful of pins in the victim's pocket, and 5 one-rupee notes. Beyond the cash, he gathered practical items for himself: dal, lentils, ghee, clarified butter, wheat flour, and a portable stove. With his stolen goods in hand, he disappeared once again into the night, leaving behind another lifeless victim and a grieving community. Raghav recounted these heinous acts without emotion, as though they were mundane anecdotes. For the police, his chilling detachment painted a picture of a man devoid of conscience, whose actions were governed solely by greed, impulse, and an insatiable thirst for violence. Raman Raghav continued his haunting confession, recounting his calculated movements after each heinous act. Following one of his murders, he sold a wristwatch stolen from the victim to a small shop for a mere Rs 130. Unfazed by the trivial amount, he resumed his search for tools to facilitate his killing spree. Returning to the blacksmith in Jogeshwari, where he had previously modified a rod, he carried with him the iron rod borrowed from his friend Michael. He requested the blacksmith to sharpen and reforge it, ensuring it was ready for his next attack. Armed with his newly enhanced weapon, Raghav set out again, heading toward Borivali. It was here that he found another victim, a man sleeping alone inside a small hut. Raghav silently entered the space and delivered a series of brutal blows to the man's head with his rod, killing him instantly. After rummaging through the deceased's belongings, he pocketed a packet of beedies and matchsticks. He then helped himself to the food the victim had prepared earlier, eating as if he were in his own home. His bloodlust unsated, Raghav moved a short distance from the hut and stumbled upon another potential target, a woman sleeping with her 2 children inside a hut. Quietly entering, he approached the sleeping family and without hesitation struck the woman multiple times with his weapon. She succumbed to the injuries almost immediately. As Raghav removed the blanket covering her body, he discovered she was unclothed underneath. The sight reignited his twisted desires, and in a horrifying act of depravity, he proceeded to sexually assault her lifeless body multiple times. After satisfying his grotesque urges, Raghav turned his attention to the rest of the hut. He consumed the remaining food he found there, gathered some tea leaves, and fled into the night, leaving behind a gruesome scene of violence and horror. The pattern of Raghav's crimes, his ruthlessness, his indifference, and his chilling demeanor emerged more clearly with every detail he provided. The police pressed him further about the earlier series of murders from 1965-66, asking if he was responsible for those as well. Without hesitation, Raghav admitted to committing those murders too. Over the course of his confession, he claimed to have killed approximately 24 people during that period alone. When asked for a total count, Raghav admitted to 41 murders, though he chillingly added that the number could be even higher. "These are just the ones I remember," he said matter-of-factly, as though recalling mundane details from his daily life. The officers, grappling with the enormity of his crimes, questioned him about his motive. Why had he killed so many people, including defenseless women and children? Raghav's reply was as bizarre as it was unsettling. He claimed his victims were bad people and insisted that he was simply following orders from God. "God told me to kill them," he stated, as if that explanation absolved him of guilt. Now that they had his confession, the police needed the weapon to solidify their case in court. When asked about the tool he had used for the murders, Raghav agreed to show them where it was hidden. He led the officers to a dense, overgrown jungle near Arya Road. There, buried beneath a bush, lay the bloodied rod that had been used in his horrific spree. Recovering the weapon was a critical moment in the investigation. It wasn't just evidence, it was the tangible link that tied Raghav to his crimes. The jagged edges of the rod and the bloodstains would later provide the forensic proof needed to corroborate his confession. As Raghav recounted these grisly events and pointed out the weapon's hiding spot, he showed no remorse. To him, it was just another chapter in his life story. A tale of unrelenting violence fueled by delusion and depravity. The weapon recovered from the jungle, a sharp iron rod, along with the statements of key witnesses, played a crucial role in building a solid case against Raman Raghav. The police took a detailed statement from the blacksmith in Jogeshwari who had helped Raghav modify the weapon. They also recorded testimony from Michael, the acquaintance who had provided Raghav with the original iron rod. With these accounts, alongside Raghav's confession and the forensic evidence, the authorities constructed an airtight case against one of India's most brutal killers. Nearly 10 months after his arrest, on June 2, 1969, Raman Raghav's trial began in court. From the very outset, the defense, led by attorney P.V. Pawar, argued that Raghav was mentally unfit to stand trial. Pawar contended that Raghav suffered from a severe mental disorder that rendered him incapable of understanding the nature of his crimes. He further claimed that during the murders, Raghav was not in control of his actions and therefore could not be held accountable. The government prosecutor M.B. Bora vehemently opposed these claims. Bora presented evidence that demonstrated Raghav's calculated approach to his crimes, including the crafting of weapons, his efforts to evade capture, and his detailed recollection of each murder during his confession. Bora argued that these actions were not those of a man unaware of his deeds, but of a killer fully conscious of his heinous acts. To resolve the debate, the court ordered Raghav to undergo a psychiatric evaluation. For 3 weeks, A police surgeon carefully examined Raghav's mental state. The findings were clear. Raghav was not only mentally sound, but was also fully aware of his actions at the time of the murder. The surgeon's report left no room for doubt and was presented to the court as conclusive evidence. On the basis of this report, along with the wealth of evidence against him, Judge C.T. Dhingra found Raman Raghav, alias Cindy Dalwai, guilty of multiple murders. The court sentenced him to death, citing the sheer brutality and scale of his crimes as justification for the maximum penalty. However, the case did not end there. Raghav's defense team appealed the verdict, taking the case to the High Court. Once again, they argued that Raghav's mental state was compromised, claiming he was incapable of distinguishing between right and wrong. The High Court decided to reevaluate the matter and commissioned a team of 3 psychiatrists to conduct an in-depth study of Raghav's mental health. The psychiatrists conducted extensive interviews with Raghav, studying his behavior and mental history. After weeks of evaluation, the team concluded that Raghav was suffering from chronic paranoid schizophrenia, a severe mental disorder characterized by delusions and impaired judgment. They stated that individuals with this condition often lose touch with reality, making it difficult for them to understand the consequences of their action. Armed with this new evidence, the defense returned to court, presenting the psychiatric findings as proof that Raghav could not be held fully responsible for his crimes. On August 4, 1987, the High Court, taking into account the medical report and ethical considerations, commuted Raghav's death sentence to life imprisonment. He was transferred to Yerwada Central Jail in Pune, where he spent the remainder of his days. Raghav's story ended in 1995 when he died of kidney failure at Sassoon Hospital in Pune. Even in his final years, his notoriety had not diminished. He remained one of the most infamous figures in India's criminal history, a man whose name still evokes terror decades after his reign of violence. Now, more than 50 years after his crimes, the memory of Raman Raghav continues to haunt those who lived through the terror of his spree. In the mid-1960s, he became synonymous with fear, a shadow lurking in the night, extinguishing lives without remorse. His name has since entered the grim pantheon of the world's most notorious serial killers, standing alongside those whose actions defy comprehension. For many who were in Mumbai during those years, the mention of Raman Raghav still sends chills down their spines. To this day, his story serves as a harrowing reminder of how one man's delusion can bring an entire city to its knees. In the history of crime, Mumbai will forever remember the years when the city was gripped by fear of a single name, Raman Raghav. The story of Raman Raghav is a chilling reminder of how deeply mental illness, left unchecked, can intersect with violence to create unimaginable tragedies. It also shows us the importance of community vigilance and the relentless pursuit of justice by law enforcement. The terror he spread during the 1960s forever changed how Mumbai approached public safety, leaving lessons that resonate even today. If you found this story compelling, consider subscribing and following for more gripping and thought-provoking tales. Your support helps us bring more stories like this to light. Don't forget to leave a comment and share your thoughts on this haunting case. Stay curious, stay safe, and we'll see you in the next story.